weird. Okay. That was fun, Gettysburg. That was really
Great trip. Great trip. I've been there 5 million times.
I mean, too.
I know
I'm
the
like,
lay of the land.
all right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Eric's View. I'm coming to you from the studios of CTV in Staten Island, New York. With me today is a remarkable individual, a man just like Bill Rogers, dedicated to the sport of running, who really shows it every single day and is just an overall outstanding person. So I want you to give it up for my amazing guest, the one, the only, Staten Island's own, Mr. Jeff Benjamin.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I need an agent. If you want to, that introduction was incredible. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, you know, I have a 10% retainer fee.
Sounds all right. Let's see what happens.
All right. But man,
Thank you.
in all seriousness, it's really great to have you here today
Thank
and all
you,
that.
thank you.
And, and by the way, this man is responsible for the interview I had with the legendary Bill Rogers, which, by the way, was a great interview. Just meeting him, it really changed my perspective on a lot of things. And so I want to thank you for that personally.
No, our pleasure. Bill has that ability to do that with people. He's a very unique person. Very unique.
But today is all about you, sir. It's, this is your night, my friend. And I want to get to know you. I want my audience to get to know you, because to get to know you is just wonderful. And your story is really unique and amazing. And I want to get into just who you are. So for those folks who don't know you, which I highly doubt there is, but for those who don't, state to the people who you are and what you do.
Right. Well, basically, I'm a high school teacher at Newdorp High School. I've been teaching in the Department of Education for 32 years. Coached for a while and fell in love with running in 1981 and never looked back.
Wow. And you were born, raised here on Staten Island?
Lived in Brooklyn as a kid, moved here when I was 7 in 1972.
And back then, Brooklyn, and to Staten Island, today and all that, it's just,
Things change all over. No matter where you travel around the United States, the things are always changing. Population's always growing. Suburbs are always having traffic. We're not alone in that situation.
In fact, Staten Island's almost becoming a little more like Brooklyn nowadays.
Yeah, that's what they want to say.
And that's true. But you know what? For you, running especially, that is your sport. That's what you are passionate about.
Right.
Where does your passion for running come from?
Well, I was very fortunate enough to stumble upon running through a Susan Wagner teacher. I was a Susan Wagner graduate, Steve Lerner. And then I moved around the sport, and people guided me, especially in my early years. My biggest influence was Art Hall, who is a member of the Staten Island Sports Hall of Fame. Art was a remarkable individual, an African-American guy who ran distance, which was very rarely seen at the competitive levels back then, especially in the 70s. And he finished in the top 5 in some of the early New York City marathons and ran a 2-hour, 22-minute Boston Marathon in 1977. And he was a coach, and he had a club for a while called the North Shore Track Club. And Art's great philosophy was, I do not care how good of a runner you are. I want to work with good people. He felt the running improvement would come later on. And he was a very inclusive guy, and I owe him a lot.
And you know what I find fascinating with all the people that are in the world of running, they have such good advice that they impart on their fellow runners or students. Especially one guy named Joe, Spivey, the late Spivey.
Jim Spivey. Jim Spivey, the American miler who lives today in the Chicago area.
Jim Spivey from Chicago. And he had some really good parts of wisdom, like sit in the chair or no deposit, no return. The hay is in the barn for championship runs.
That's right.
He's, to me, sort of the Yogi Berra of track and field coaches.
Well, I don't know if he'll be happy to hear that. He's a Chicago fan, but we'll see what happens.
I know, but in terms of, how Yogi Berra had his yogiisms.
Yep.
We call them Spiveyisms.
Spivey. Yeah, like I said, I'm sure he'll be thrilled to hear it.
Art Hall, like, and I seen this earlier photo right here of the
Right.
two of you. Where did that take place?
This took place about 25 years ago at the Staten Island Advance Memorial Day run. It was the only time I ever beat Art in a race. Art was 48. I was 30. So, the age in primes. But, even after that race, Art still beat me. So, he's just remarkable guy. He once ran the 5-mile 4th of July run, which is now called the Ariel Newman run. I think he was 48 years old. He ran 27 minutes for 5 miles, which in today's world would win the race outright.
And that just took place recently. And
Yes.
the next one, the Triple Crown, because the annual Triple Crown takes place, the first event, Memorial Day, the second being July 4th, and the final race, of course, the Labor Day run.
Right, for the Selleck brothers.
Yep.
Right, Marty and Tom. So.
And that raises money for different organizations?
Yeah, every race has their own fundraising groups, that they advertise where the money's going to go to. So it's good stuff. It's really good stuff. But my senior year, I ran for Susan Wagner. And my coach there was Steve Zaccarello, who was a really great, fiery coach. And we won the city champs in cross country.
What type of regimen did he put you through at Susan Wagner? Like, what was the daily regimen for?
Well, it was funny. One of the greatest coaches of all time is a New Zealander named Arthur Lydiard. And Arthur Lydiard, if you Google him, has a Lydiard program. And he took guys from neighborhoods in New Zealand and had this certain way of training where they all went on either to set world records or win medals in Olympics and championships, all from the half mile, the 800 meters, up to the marathon. And Arthur Lydiard's great program has been followed. Some people follow it to this day. The New York Roadrunners, I know, does a bit of this too. You do a period of about 10 to 15, even 20 weeks of just endurance running. Go as you feel. Then after that phase number 2 is called the anaerobic phase, where basically you kick the heck out of yourself with a lot of hard workouts. You're exhausted during that phase. But because you did the bottom foundation with the endurance, theoretically, that middle one, while extremely tough, your body can handle it. And then peak time, either, a 5-week to 10-day peak period where you drop your mileage, make it fast, and the body's all sharpened up. But you see, here's the big key, which a lot of runners tend not to do. After you peak, you're supposed to take a break.
Oh.
And to a lot of runners, that's sacrilegious. But that's why you build up for the peak. And Arthur Lydiard came to Staten Island for a big, huge clinic in the summer, I believe, of '82. And my coach, Steve Zaccarello, who followed a different program before, which was still successful, opted to take Arthur's program and throw it into us. And it worked like magic. I remember September cross country, we were not running very well. We were just coming off the base phase. Then even through like late September, early October, we really weren't running well either because we were exhausted from the anaerobic phase. But then once we got into the peak phase, all of our time started dropping. And on that muddy, rainy day in 1982, we did very well, the 7 of us.
And this photo right here, that's a photo of all your fellow
That's
racers.
the city champions. Yeah, I was the 5th man, by the way. The first man was Jimmy Lynch in the bottom right. The second man was Eric McCann on the bottom left.
Another Eric.
Yep. The third guy, the tall guy on my left in the photo was Charlie Malarkey. Then Scott McMillan on the far left, and myself. And then my teammates, Vinnie Giles and Kenny McGill. And what's really great about our group is that if you look at these guys, I would say out of the 7 of us, 5 of us to this day are still involved in this sport. We're still doing some kind of running or some kind of coaching.
Or clinics?
Something. And, the one guy that I keep very close tabs with is Vinnie Giles. Vinnie coaches a lot of kids. He coaches St. Peter's Boys High School. And he also has a program called The Camp, Care Track Club, all run on the North Shore of Staten Island. And he has produced more scholarship track and field athletes, high school, over the last 25 years than any coach in the borough.
Wow.
Very remarkable. Very remarkable. And, we're all good guys. And once in a while, we do get together and keep in touch. And the school was nice enough to host for us a reunion, which was organized by Chet Kudik, the alumni advisor back in 2012 for our 30th. So it was a really good time, a really good time.
Man, and you guys all just came together, just commiserate and just talked about,
just reminisced.
about the past
Yeah,
and all the different things that you guys, and probably some laughs.
Right. Well, Eric, I'm at the point where I tell people in the last century, so that's what I say now. So this is all in the last century for the most part.
Like,
so it sounds like ancient history.
any like if there was like a funny story that you had to tell about, one funny story from that.
Well, gee, I don't know.
Is
this a G-rated show?
That's family, that's good for a family. If not, that's okay. We can.
We played a lot of jokes on each other. We had a lot of fun.
There's too many.
Just a lot of crazy stuff. It kept us loose.
All right.
But at the same time, when it was time to do the work, it was time to be serious.
Yeah.
Zaccarello made sure that we were training professionally.
Oh, yeah.
And and Coach Zaccarello made sure of that. I mean, it's the same thing like with Art Hall. Art Hall was a very funny guy, very inclusive. When it was time to do the work, it was time to do the work. But when the race was over and the cool down was taking place, that was a fun time. People bandied about, talked. I always found, when I first got into the sport when I was younger, seeing Art Hall battle it out with a bunch of guys in Central Park and really battle all out for these races. When the race was over, hey guys, let's go cool down. And it brought a camaraderie among the runners, which was very unique, very unique.
That's what I like about the sport of running, that camaraderie that felt that runners have with each other, especially when a runner is down and if they're hurt, that somebody will stop in the middle of what they're doing to pick up another runner. This happened actually.
That goes on, yeah.
Happened at I think the most recent Olympic Games in Brazil, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it did. With Molly Huddle, an American who helped a teammate and helped the fellow Olympian cross the line. And it's great. Sportsmanship is a great concept. Some people feel it's a dying attitude. I'd like to think it's not. I found most runners to be very inclusive at all levels, whether they're Olympic gold medalists or just somebody who's running 15 minutes a mile. I find these people to be very wonderful. I also feel that the one guy who will show a picture in a little while, the great Bill Welsh, who just turned 89 on July 5th. He's one of the most inclusive human beings in the world. Notice I didn't say the borough or the state or the country.
The world.
The world.
That sounds like somebody I would like to meet as well.
Yeah, well, you can get him.
And, and I know with any sport, doesn't matter whether it's running, baseball, football, every sport has a different method of training or different schemes or patterns or techniques that people use. In the world of running, what techniques are there today, and what techniques used to be in running that is not utilized today?
Right. In the early 1900s, if you trained every day, you were considered a maniac who was going to wind up killing yourself.
Yeah, I don't think I could do every day.
Right. Whereas today, especially among the distance runners, they run twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day, every day for training periods. It's very remarkable because when you look at the athletes of 100 years ago, the times that they ran obviously are not as fast as today. But in that era before Nike shoes, dirt track, and very not scientific training methods, these people ran unbelievable.
I know, and you know what's really crazy? Just thinking about all these different methods. I remember you were talking about a specific method that you did with Susan Wagner, and then when you went to the college Staten Island, did they do anything different than what you learned in high school?
Our college Staten Island coach was Ed Healy, probably the greatest Staten Island high school cross-country runner of all, who ran for Farrell, was undefeated in cross-country, even against the nation's best at Manhattan College and the Eastern States Championships. Still holds the island record for 2.5 at Van Cortlandt Park, 12 minutes, 30 seconds. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's 5 minutes a mile exactly over the rolling hills terrain of Van Cortlandt Park. And Ed went to Georgetown where he competed very well, and then he became our coach. He pretty much followed the same thing, like an endurance phase, and then the training anaerobic phase, and then a peak phase. So I've pretty much used it. My great New Zealand pal Rod Dixon, who we've had on Staten Island before, who was a 352 miler, but also ran the New York Marathon in 1983 and won it in 2:08:59. Rod is a big believer in that kind of training, So,
And I'm trying to find the photo of Mr. Dixon, who, by the way, looks suspiciously like Willem Dafoe.
okay, well, he'll be happy to hear that. Eric, when this show winds up on YouTube, you might get some praise or flack from some of these people. But I guess it's the nature of the beast.
Probably most likely flack I'll get for that one. But you know what? I can't find now. But yeah, when I looked at him, I was like, wow, he does look like him for a bit. But besides that, for those people who don't know who Rod Dixon is, who is Rod Dixon into the world of running?
Well, like I said, Rod Dixon was the Olympic bronze medalist in 1972 in the 1500 the mile. He was also number 1 in the world in 5K. As he got older, he was getting slower. That's not unusual. But he found that his endurance carried with him and made him stronger in a way. So like I said, in 1983, in one of the most dramatic finishes in the New York Marathon history, maybe in marathon history, he catches the great British runner Jeff Smith right at the 26-mile mark with 0.2 to go and outkicks him and wins the race. Driving rainstorm, and he ran 2 hours, 8 minutes. So, Rodney is just an amazingly versatile runner, and he'll tell you a lot of it comes from the endurance training.
Yep.
So,
I wish that I could do half of what he can do.
Yeah, me too. I think all of us do.
And but other training methods that you were getting onto, like what's in Kenya? I know they do what is called high altitude training for a lot of their marathon runners, and that's why a lot of them do win. And they're in the Olympic facility, if I'm not mistaken, is in Colorado, which is great for high elevation training.
Right, and Eric, just so you know, a lot of distance runners in the world do the altitude training at certain times of year. Not just the Kenyans are born at it.
Yeah,
that's why, like Bill Rogers will say, they have a geographic advantage. If you think of their lifestyle, there aren't that many cars in Kenya.
They have to run everywhere.
It's an undeveloped country in many areas. Many of them are shepherds. They're on their feet. If school is 5 miles away, they got to run, beginning at like kindergarten, So with the genetics of all the years of your ancestors combined with the Rift Valley, which is very high up, their lung capacity is unbelievable. And science has shown that if you do train at altitude the right way, or if you're born at it like a Kenyan, when you come down to sea level, like the New York Marathon or the London Marathon or the Chicago Marathon, your performances increase a lot. So, and one runner who experimented with it, ironically, the great Jim Ryan, who is America's greatest miler in my own opinion of all time. In 1967, Jim ran 3:51 for the mile. It was recently the 51st anniversary of that race. After 2 laps, the guy was by himself on a dirt track and ran the first 2 laps somewhat conservative, banging out literally like a 152, 153 last 2 laps to like decimate the world record. And the following year, the Olympic Games were held in Mexico City, and they were up in altitude. And Ryan, a coach came to him and said, Jim, you got to start training at altitude. And Ryan mentioned how, I remember I was in 3:51 shape. I was flown out to Colorado, high up. I did a mile trial when I got off the train, and I ran 4:08, and I was dying because of the thin air.
Yeah.
Ryan did the altitude training, which in 1968 for an American was very revolutionary. Many were not doing it. And in those Olympic Games, Ryan ironically lost to Kip Keino of Kenya, who set an Olympic record running. Ryan and his coaches thought that if he ran 3:38 for the 1500, he'd win the gold medal. He ran 3:35 and got the silver. So if you look at it in retrospect, that was a phenomenal performance.
Oh, yes.
But just to let you know, Bill Rogers never trained at altitude.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Rod Dixon didn't. He really didn't do much altitude training either. There's no magic training formula. There's also people who warn you that if you do go to altitude, don't push it too much. You can get something called altitude sickness, where you get fevers and you don't feel good because you're pushing the workout too much, thinking you're at sea level, and the lungs and body have not adjusted. So you're compromising your immune system.
And there's another thing too as well. And when you're running downhill and all that, there's a certain method, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the greatest downhill runner of all time is Bill Rogers. And he'll love this. I think the greatest downhill runner I ever saw in Staten Island is Ralph Porzio, who's still around and keeps busy with things. And Bill is not a tall guy. Ralph is not a tall guy. I think height has a bit to play with it, but you really got to try to run like perpendicular to like the ground, and that's very difficult to do, especially when you're a tall guy. I despise running down hills, by the way.
So for me, because we're about the same height and all that.
Yep,
And so if I wanted to run downhill, it might be incredibly difficult for me.
Very difficult. If you can master it, that's great. However, though, many running injuries do come. People say, "Oh, I have knee pain, I have hip pain, I have this." A lot of it is brought down due to the downhill running. The downhill pounding has a concentric exercise on the joints that is really not good. So, for example, in my school, I will always go up the stairs. Going up strengthens the hamstrings, strengthens the calves, strengthens the quads. I try to avoid going downstairs as much as possible. I see runners sometimes, they'll start their run. Within the first 5 minutes, it's downhill. It's not conducive. And, if you continue doing it, you got a good chance of making a podiatrist or orthopedist very happy.
Well, let's go to CSI.
Sure.
So after you were done with Susan Wagner High School,
Right.
you got accepted and went to CSI. Right. What did you study at CSI? What was
I majored in history,
which
I am a social studies teacher today. So.
any particular history or US?
Mostly American.
Okay.
Yeah, you're always, just like with running, you're always learning. There is no ultimate scholar in any subject. You're always learning from other people.
Any particular part of U.S. history that you like?
Civil War's cool.
I know we both had that. Yeah.
Yep. So I'm a big Gettysburg guy and
Yep.
travel there quite often. I'm blessed. We have a program at Newdorp called the Gilda Lamon Foundation, which sponsors our trips to Gettysburg for the kids every year in the fall. Oh. So it's really a great thing.
I go there frequently a lot too, every year with my family.
That's great.
It's a beautiful town. If you ever get a chance, folks, please definitely go to Gettysburg, all right?
It's a great place to run. A lot of hills and it's
yeah.
parkland and really good place to run.
And not only that, just take a moment when you're there and think about the events and what took place there and the sacrifices people made and all
Absolutely.
And all the different regiments, whether it's the Union or the Confederate side. Just think about all these people and definitely go check out the museums. The restaurants are great. Awesome hotels. I sound like a tourist guy for Gettysburg, but no, definitely when you get a chance, folks, I urge you for once, for even a day, go there. You won't regret
definitely
it.
worth the trip.
And then you joined. You obviously joined the CSI track and field program.
Yeah, I was on a college Staten cross country program.
With the coach you just mentioned
Yep,
earlier.
Yep.
And what was he like?
Very analytical, very encouraging, very analytical, great guy. He's a school teacher in the Board of Ed. And like I said, Ed Healy in recent years has finally gotten some recognition because, as I said before, his high school performances at Monsignor Farrell his senior year are just, we haven't seen performances like that before or since. So
he holds the all-time record for most wins without a loss.
Yeah, well, he was undefeated his senior year cross country, undefeated.
So the Rocky Marciano.
Yeah, I think he'd be happy with that.
Yeah.
Yep. So
See, I'm making some.
no, you're doing good. You're doing good.
Got
brother.
some good nicknames.
Yeah, you're doing great.
And then so after you graduated from CSI, what was next for you?
Well, I became a teacher. Wow. I've been there ever since, and around the late '80s, I started doing like some writing. I found
Run blog.
Well, thanks to Fred LeBeau, the late Fred LeBeau. He gave me my first press credential, which was for a New York Roadrunner track and field event. And the track and field world, which I think a lot of my friends can attest to, is a very small, fraternal world.
Yes.
You can meet everybody eventually. So,
And that's like I said earlier with the camaraderie too, that
right,
the
right,
respect that is shown on the track and field course is really, not to say that the other sports don't, but with track and field, I think you feel the respect.
Track and field and running are very inclusive because it does not matter what you look like. Short, tall, big, small, doesn't matter. There is like event for any athlete, running, jumping, or throwing. There is something for everybody. And if people would take maybe, I don't know, NBC Sports has
and
track meets right now going on.
Yeah.
And see these athletes who show up. You'll see somebody way big. Like, this is a track meet? Yeah, because it's probably a shot putter or a field athlete.
Yep.
It is a very inclusive sport. And most high school programs always have one rule. There are no tryouts. You show up, you're on. So, it's the kind of sport you develop. I mean, some people develop very quickly. Others are a 4-year, 5-year plan. But if you could dedicate yourself to it, it's a quality that can actually help you out in other aspects of life as well.
It's a great exercise for
Absolutely.
one. That and swimming to me are the two best sports in terms of exercising.
Well, a lot of sports are, but track and field is the most inclusive. You could have anybody on a track team. So.
And I like the javelin. That's one of my favorite events is the javelin. I don't know. It's just seeing them taking the spike. Is that what they call it?
They call it the javelin.
I know.
Take the javelin and just chuck it.
With the spike at one end, and you're throwing it as far as you can. But also the most difficult too is the event where they have to jump into the sand pit and try to get the furthest distance.
Right.
And I know I'm probably messing up the name of that event somehow.
That's right. You're doing good.
But I think it's always fun, and I just like when funniest things that happen though when I see that track and field event when the athletes are so anxious to get ready, and before the start gun goes off and somebody goes off.
The last people you want to be around are sprinters before a race.
Oh, really? Why?
So focused. Well, think about it. Jesse Owens said it the best when he lined up in 1936 at Hitler's Nazi German Olympics. In a documentary later on, he said, "This is it. A lifetime of training for just 10 seconds. And the sprinters just have to be perfection. So distance runners can make little mistakes here and there. They can make little errors. They can come back. Not 100 meters.
My favorite sprinter, of course, and this is probably a lot of people outside the United States.
Oh, the Bolt man.
Usain
Bolt, yeah.
I love Usain Bolt. He's one of those charismatic, funny yet intriguing track and field runners.
His pre-race, requisite, how he behaves is a lot different than the others, but it works. And he retired though last year, and now supposedly in the news he's going to try to go for a soccer team or something like that. So wish him all the best.
I can't see that. There were people even saying that he could be a wide receiver in the NFL, but the problem with that is, you can only sprint so much, but in a game like football, you have to have so much energy for 4 quarters, 60 minutes.
That's true.
And he would be gassed out before the first quarter even ended.
You never know.
Speaking of the Olympics and with Usain Bolt, like of all the Olympics that you have watched, which one would you say is your favorite year? The one that really like above all others.
Right. Well, I've been very lucky. I went to the '96 Olympics in Atlanta, and then I went to 2016 in Rio
as a correspondent for SI Live.
Somewhat, yeah, somewhat. And run blog run.
And run blog.
Yeah, and my favorite Olympic moment that I've ever seen personally is seeing Matthew Centrowitz win the 1,500 meters, the metric mile in the Olympic Games. No American. In 2016, the Chicago Cubs won the World Series. Everybody made a big deal about that because they said, "Oh my God, that's the first time the Cubs have won the World Series since 1908."
The Billy Goat and all the...
Right. And in 1908, Mel Sheppard of the United States won the gold medal in London in the 1,500 meters. Staten Island's Abel Kiviat, our greatest track and field athlete of all time, won a silver in 1912, just missing gold, literally by fractions, okay? But since 1908, these great American milers we've had, Jim Ryan, Glenn Cunningham, Steve Scott, Jim Spivey, Joe Falcon, never got the gold. Alan Webb never got the gold. And in 2016, on that unbelievable Saturday night, to watch Matthew Centrowitz win it was unbelievably rewarding for American fans. But also, if you know Matthew Centrowitz, Matthew knows the names of all the runners I had mentioned to you.
Oh, yeah.
So I always bring up a story how there was a Yankee Old Timers Day in the early 90s, and Joe DiMaggio came out, and he got this gigantic applause. And one of the Yankee players, this is what I read in the Daily News, one of the Yankee players said, "Who's that guy?"
Oh.
The other guy said, "You don't know who that guy is? He married Marilyn Monroe."
And he hates that.
They knew nothing about the 56-game hitting streak, his unbelievable play as a center fielder, unbelievable hitting. That's what they knew him for. So I think, I guess I'm slanted towards history. It's always great to know your history. But I do know that prior to his race in Rio, Matt received a text from Jim Ryan wishing him all the best with a praise from the New Testament. And Matthew acknowledged that. Matthew has that gold medal, and he knows, like what it's worth as far as this